Channel Barker here. The past couple of days have been kind of rough, so I guess it really shouldn't be expected that I'd be uploading every single day. I decided to do a Afterthoughts video for Skyrim, so pretty much like a part 2 for it. I wanted to talk about the fanfiction that I wrote and pretty much the order that they're best read in, because I wrote these one-shots as I was inspired. I'm probably going to give you a bit of a background on the Dragonborn that I was using for these one-shots. Her name is Aria Quintence. She's a Nord. Her backstory involves her being the daughter of a jeweler, and her mother was a warrior. She was born in Skyrim, but was raised in Cyrodiil. And it's not, since you have a choice for what you want your Dragonborn to be, your Dragonborn's backstory is pretty much whatever you want it to be. Aria's backstory involves her coming back to Skyrim just after the Civil War broke out, because she no longer felt at home in Cyrodiil, which is pretty much the homeland for the Imperials. And she ended up getting caught up with the Stormcloaks at Darkwater Crossing, where the ambush mechanically took place within the game. Her good friends, she pretty much makes friends with just about every race, so I tried to make her as not like a stereotypical Nord who doesn't really care for magic or for elves. I didn't really explore too much with her making friends with other races, because it was mainly just different conflicts throughout the actual game's quest lines. She does share some similarities with Kalisa, who, if you remember, is my Khajiit Dragonborn from my second save file. Kalisa's influences on Aria include being married to Farkas from the Companions, having Proudspire Manor in Solitude, the house you can buy in Solitude, and her 2 children. As Kalisa, I adopted Samuel and Sophie. So I gave Kalisa's marriage and children and house to Aria for the use in these stories. I'm going to be pulling up my fanfiction page up here on my computer, so just give me one quick second to get there. I remember saying in my previous video that Skyrim was actually quite good for my inspiration, because I suffer writer's block almost all the time. So whenever I come across something that gives me a lot of inspiration that I just have to keep writing for it, for me that's always a good sign. I have 16 stories, and several of them are actually 2-shots. The timeline that I wrote these for, it starts with Helgen, and it moves on through up to the very last one, which is called Of Gods, Dragons, and Sovngarde. But here's the timeline for the one-shots that I've written so far, and if you actually visit either my DeviantART page or my fanfiction.net account, you'll actually see that they were not uploaded in this order, because I wrote them as I was inspired. But the timeline is Attack on Helgen, Meeting of the First and the Last, The Final Clash of the First and the Last, Memories Put to Rest, Between Friends, Compassion of the Dragonborn, Vadon Ark Mindovin, Fronzi, The Parting of Ways, Deathman's Cairn, Realization, Admittance, Decision Made, Dual Desires, Val Dovakinro Lapsul, and Of Gods, Dragons, and Sovngarde. I really like everything that I've ever written, And if you remember in my first video, I believe, I did come across a couple problems with some people, with all of two people who had issues with either the quality of my writing or what have you. I had to block the one guy because he was pretty much basically my policy is that if you don't like what you read, don't say anything to me if you don't have anything to contribute, because I'm not going to care. If you're gonna write something mean just to be mean, that's not going to stop me. It's not going to stop me from writing how I've always written. This first guy actually had a problem with dual desires because it takes place after the game, with Arya already being married to Farkas and having adopted her 2 children. But an aspect that I gave Arya is the fact that she has unrequited love for Ulfric Stormcloak. I didn't want to put her with him, simply because that's not how I imagined her to be. As the Dragonborn, the way I feel is that she does the most good out in the world, so she can't really do what she can do if she's sitting in the palace as the High Queen. And it was actually lampshaded by Ulfric in The Parting of Ways, where he actually brings up the fact that with him winning the Civil War, he might actually start receiving pressure from those he rules to ask Arya's hand in marriage. And she pretty much says that if she had been any other woman, she probably would have jumped on that. But she holds her duty to Skyrim in higher regard. But even after getting married to Farkas, her feelings for Ulfric didn't fade. This dude had an issue with that. And really, the theme for Dual Desires was faithfulness despite temptation. It's been alluded to in many of the later timeline one-shots that she had plenty of opportunity to cheat, I guess, but she never took them. She took her vows to Farkas very seriously, and she grew to love Farkas even more. I kind of picture Farkas as the kind of man who's very understanding. He doesn't really blame anybody for how they feel. He pretty much up and tells Arya that it's okay to feel as conflicted as she feels, because if you want to make a very human character, you have to give them faults. Because if a character is perfect, it comes off flat, because in the real world, nothing is perfect. We live in a very broken world. So that was the issue that I had with this one guy. And then I had a guy who was an unregistered user pretty much telling me that my writing is mediocre. That actually goes against what I've heard a lot of people say. Because my Skyrim one-shots are a lot like the stories that I wrote concerning various ships like the Titanic. They're very spontaneous, and from the people who like my Spirit Of series, which is about those ships, them being as spontaneous as they are is what makes them very good. And I know I've said this already, but I don't write for anybody else. I just share things. I think that a lot of writers write for others, which is perfectly fine. I just don't. I feel like when I write so I could read and see how well I've come since I was 12 years old when I started writing anything at all. And people like them or they don't like them, that's perfectly fine. I just think that if you're not going to tell me anything constructive about how I can make my writing better, then you really have no business talking to me at all. Because I'm not going to take you seriously, I'm just going to think you're a bit of an idiot. And I will make the assumption that I probably have more talent than you do, if you're just going to tell me that something that I write sucks. You're not helping me. You're not even helping yourself. You're just trying to get a high off of tearing me down, and I'd hate to break it to people like that, but if you ever want to get a rise out of me, that's not the way to do it. That window's been shut since 2000. I no longer care what other people think. I also just refuse to be drawn into internet wars simply because I've been through war zones like that pretty much my entire internet life, and I'm very, very tired of that. Anyway, sorry for digressing a bit. Since I gave the list, you've already noticed that I have like 3 stories whose titles are in Dovazul. Fadon Ark Mindovin roughly translates into friend and mentor. It details Aria's relationship with Parthenax. It's pretty much about how I think it would have gone down after the Blades tell you that if you want their continued help, you need to kill Parthenax. And Aria pretty much tells you exactly what I think about that. I truly believe that everything that Parthenax did since he turned against Alduin, with helping mankind take down their dragon overlords, that was his atonement. What happened in the past really has no bearing over 2,000 years later. Fronzi means kindred spirits. It takes place before the Battle of Solitude. It's just a conversation between Aria and Stora and Ulfric before the final battle for Solitude. Pretty basic there. And then Fel Dovahkiin Datsul, it translates as the Dragonborn's last day. It's a 2-shot, where the first part is where Aria comes to terms with some things with her now grown children, Samuel and Sophie. That was also the 1-shot that actually inspired Dual Desires. Samuel came clean that he actually overheard Aria and Farkas talking one night, and he jumped to the wrong conclusion about what he heard. The other 1-shots, these particular 1-shots, Meeting of the First and the Last, Final Clash of the First and the Last, and Memories Put to Rest, are what I call the Dragonborn Triad. It's basically Aria interacting with Mirek. Meeting of the First and the Last takes place during that particular cutscene when you are in Mirek's temple on Solstheim, and you read the Black Book there, and you're taken to Apocrypha where you see him for the first time. Final Clash of the First and the Last is the pretty much the final battle in the game against Mirek, and pretty much reveals how Aria feels about Mirek in general. She feels drawn to him in a sense because he is Dragonborn like her. Before, she really had no problem with being the only Dragonborn because she really had nobody to really compare herself to, or to, what's the word? She really had nobody who knew what it was like to be her, to be what's essentially a dragon soul wrapped in a mortal shell. But since meeting Mirek, she felt conflicted about actually ending him, because he is exactly what she is. And that doesn't mean that she glossed over anything that he did as a dragon priest or during the situation on Solstheim, but she didn't really feel right killing him, and she grew to really hate Hermaeus Mora for doing that for her. Memories Put to Rest is pretty much her meeting Mirek for the very last time in something that I created specifically for this particular one-shot called the Soul Plane. It was a final meeting between their two souls after she absorbed his. And he pretty much makes her swear that if they were able to fight again in Sovngarde after she dies, it would be a fight without Daedric interference. Between Friends is kind of a cute little story. It's basically a friendship fic between Arya and Ralof, who I think is one of my favorite characters because he's pretty much the first character you ever meet in Skyrim. I can see him and the Dragonborn becoming friends if you join the Stormcloak side of the conflict. There's really not much to say about that one. Compassion of the Dragonborn is, it actually brings in my Khajiit Dragonborn, but simply as a Khajiit, not as the Dragonborn. It's pretty much Khaleesi as a young, child when she meets the Dragonborn area. And both that and Between Friends take place after the Battle of Whiterun. And Arya first met Khaleesi when she came across their caravan burned out by bandits, and Khaleesi was the only survivor. Khaleesi's mother survived long enough to ask Arya to take Khaleesi to, I think it's Rashid, one of the Khajiit traders that you meet in the game, so that she could be looked after and protected. And it's an exercise about a particular character trait for Arya. She's very compassionate. That's why she pretty much has friends and enemies alike, but she's more likely to make friends with those who deserve it. She is always wanting to help those who can't help themselves. And in Khaleesi's case, she was a child. There was really nothing she could do to defend herself on her own. Desmond's Cairn, Realization, Admittance, and Decision Made are pretty much all focused on Arya's relationship with Farkas. Desmond's Cairn is obviously the it's part of the quest line to become a companion. I was kind of inspired by something that I had read on DeviantART, but I did it with pretty much my own way. It's basically when she and Farkas just start off being just friends. Realization takes place sometime after that, where the two were caught up in a Silverhand ambush, which left Arya wounded and poisoned because she took a arrow that was meant to kill Farkas. And Farkas, who couldn't afford to wait around waiting for the beast blood to subside, carried her all the way to Windhelm as a werewolf, and he met with Ulfric Stormcloak and a contingent of his soldiers on the road. And Farkas himself came to realize that he was starting to feel something for Arya, and Arya, in a sense, was starting to feel the same way. Admittance takes place after that, after Arya recovered from the poisoning and returned to Whiterun, only to find out that Farkas hadn't come back yet. And when Farkas does come back, and they start talking, and then Farkas pretty much asked her to marry him. But he also said that he'd be willing to wait for however long it took for her to get things in her own heart figured out. And then Decision Made pretty much follows up on that, where she actually gives him his answer. That one's probably one of my favorite one-shots that I've written. Since I already talked about the the second part of Valdovakinro Latzul was pretty much Samuel and Sophie going to the throat of the world to speak with Paarthurnax after their mother's death. She made them promise that when she was dead that they would take her elvish warhammer to him as sort of like a memento so that he would never forget her. Because that's how much of a friend she saw Paarthurnax as. That's pretty much what that one was. And then the last one, which is Of Gods, Dragons, and Sovngarde, it seems to be my most popular one on fanfiction.net. In the timeline, it takes place last, but it also takes place between the two chapters in Valdovakinro. It's pretty much area in Sovngarde having already passed away, but she hasn't reached Shor's Hall yet. She actually took some time to wander around on the outside to see the Nord's afterlife for herself, because the last time that she was there to fight with Alduin for the final fight, she didn't really get enough chance to really see the land that she would actually go home to after death. One other aspect for Harry is that she carries a lot of guilt for things that she's done in the past, which I guess is kind of, it's supposed to be the downside to her great compassion. She carries regrets for some things. While in Sovngarde, she meets with Akatosh as his dragon avatar, which you actually see in Morrowind, because how Akatosh fought against Mehrunes Dagon during the Oblivion Crisis was as a golden dragon. So that's how Arya comes across him as well. He takes her to a different plane, and she is, I guess you can say, she is reunited with Alduin, who is trapped there until the time comes for him to destroy Nirn. I created a particular shot for this one shot because it, I'm really sorry. It roughly translates as soul, destiny, separated, because the reason why I brought Alduin into this was so that he could take the dragon souls that Arya was still carrying around even in death. She didn't really want to carry all that, especially since she was carrying the soul of her greatest rival, Miraak. She has that particular shroud used on her and has all those souls drawn out of her, but when it came time for Miraak's soul to be extracted, she actually used the Unrelenting Force shout on Alduin to make sure that he didn't take Miraak's soul. That's kind of how she feels about Miraak in general. She had a hard time letting him go, so to speak, because he was her rival. She grew to respect him over the years of her life, but again, without forgetting the kind of man he was. She knew and understood that Miraak was bad news, but you don't always have to just hate your enemy. It has been seen in history that two people on opposing sides can indeed respect each other. Of Gods, Dragons, and Sovngarde shows Arya's last act of compassion, more or less, before she can finally go to Shor's Hall to live out her afterlife. She pretty much begs Akatosh not to let Hermaeus Mora have Miraak's soul, because she may hate Miraak on some level, but she hates Hermaeus Mora even more than that. She doesn't want him to have Miraak's soul, because she feels a bit of a kinship with the first Dragonborn. over their shared powers and I'm pretty sure their shared destiny. When you really think about it, Mirek made sure that the prophecy that was carved into Alduin's wall came to pass in his own way. Because I think every Dragonborn had the potential to stop Alduin. But because he was shunted forward in time through the Elder Scroll, that destiny had passed from Mirek to the last Dragonborn as prophesized in Alduin's wall. Anything else? It looks like that's really all I really had to say. I just wanted to make this a relatively quick video, even though now I see that I've almost been talking for almost a half hour now. I'm gonna end this right here by saying thanks for watching. I will have links to my two websites in the description like always. I'm going to be jumping off and playing Assassin's Creed Rogue. I just finished Brotherhood last night and I started on Rogue again. After I beat Rogue, I might do an Afterthoughts video on that because I haven't really been playing Rogue for very long, but already the story has become a bit more interesting than I initially thought. Because with a title like Rogue, you know that you're probably going to be playing as a traitor to the Assassin Order, which Shay has already done, but it's not as clear-cut or as simple as I initially thought, because I pretty much told myself that there had better be a good reason why, because this is essentially the first game where you're playing a traitor. I don't consider Haytham Kenway to be the first that you play as, simply because by the time you find out the truth about Haytham, he was already on the other side. He was already a Templar, so I don't really consider him to be a true turncoat within the timelines presented in the game. So Shay Patrick Cormac is the first traitor, and I'm kind of curious to see about where his story is going to take us. Just to give some brief thoughts already about I'm already liking a lot of the characters that I've seen so far. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see Benjamin Franklin. I was not expecting him at all. And I also was not expecting to see George Washington as a younger man, because within the chronological order of the games, Rogue takes place before Assassin's Creed 3, because you meet a younger Achilles, the assassin who trained Connor, and you're essentially seeing a younger George Washington. And if you haven't already known this fact, I was actually kind of surprised when I learned this, but George Washington was actually a natural redhead. You'll actually see that in this game if you ever play it. I had never known that he was a redhead. I'm actually kind of curious about Lisbon, Portugal, because I believe it was 1755. Shay was in Lisbon looking for a piece of Eden, and when he picked it up and it dissolved, a massive earthquake broke out. And now you need to see if there's any historical evidence for an earthquake destroying Lisbon. I believe it was 1755. So yeah, I'm actually quite interested in seeing where this is going. Like Black Flag, with it taking place, with the modern portions of the game taking place after Assassin's Creed 3, I like all the various tidbits that you can learn about previous characters. I recently actually came across a data file on Ezio Auditore, and I'm thinking, yeah, this proves that Abstergo Entertainment is indeed Abstergo Industries. Because I remember when I first played Black Flag, I was thinking, I'm not entirely sure how this works in relation to Assassin's Creed 3, but now I'm starting to see exactly how games taking place after Assassin's Creed 3 fit within the overall lore that was presented in Assassin's Creed 1, the Ezio trilogy, and Assassin's Creed 3, as well as Liberation. That's another game I still need to play. But yeah, I'm gonna pretty much save all that for Assassin's Creed Afterthoughts video. So, this is Jana signing out, and I will see you next time.